Good evening and welcome to GMAT by Physics Wala. So you know that we are on a mission, right? If you are preparing for an exam, we want to be right there standing in your corner helping you. My name is Vikrant and I am your personal coach for all things related to verbal on this particular channel. And today we have an AMA. So this is basically my first session here. I have became a part of the GMAT team very recently. I have been a part of Physics Wala for quite a while now. But then I've also started contributing to the GMAT team, helping the students learn different things, different areas within verbal. And if you happen to have any question, issue or concern, this is going to be a fabulous, fantastic time for you to go ahead and ask that from me. And today, just like every session, I would specifically focus on one aspect, and that is critical reasoning. So if you have been preparing for GMAT for a while, then you already know the different areas that get asked in the exam. In case you do not, let me go ahead and then share it with you. So basically, when we talk about the GMAT exam, we go through three sections. So what are those three sections? Well, there is a section that the examiner calls quantitative reasoning. Then there is this section called verbal reasoning. So you notice this emphasis on reasoning that they have in each one of these two sections. And then they happen to have this third section in the focus edition. It was not a part of the GMAT until last year, which is called data insights. So there you go. Now, each one of these three sections is 45-minute long, and you get 21 questions here, 23 here, and another 20 here, 45 minutes each, which means that you have 135 minutes in all, and you can afford to take you can attempt them in whichever order that you prefer, and you can take a 10-minute break in between. So within the verbal reasoning section, within the verbal reasoning segment, we broadly divide it across two things. So let's dive a little deeper into that. So when we talk about the verbal part, you are going to get a few reading comprehension passages, and you are going to get paragraph based critical reasoning. So within this, you can expect somewhere around 10 to 12 questions from critical reasoning, typically a question or two higher from RC, depending upon or going by the pattern that is emerging. But then the deal is critical reasoning can also influence some of the questions that you go on to solve in RC, and therefore it actually happens to have a bigger impact. So if you have any question, any concern with respect to CR, this is the session where you can go ahead and ask that right away, and I would love to deal with it during the course of our session. So, questions. So anything that you fancy asking. Okay, question types. All right. So when it comes to critical reasoning, when I sit down and prepare with people, of course, if you dive really deeper, you can get into subcategories and all that. But broadly speaking, there are these 11 different question types within critical reasoning that you need to go ahead and master in order to answer every question correctly. And you already know that GMAT is a computer adaptive test. And because of that adaptive nature, you cannot skip any question, and therefore it's absolutely important that you go ahead and master each one of those 11 question types. So we broadly divide them across some categories. So for example, we know I call a particular category assumption family questions, where you have identify the assumption, strengthen the argument, weaken the argument, identify the logical flaw, and evaluate the argument. So these 5 together essentially are assumption family questions. Then you can get structure based questions. One of them is bold face questions. Another one is a dialogue based question. Then a very important question type is where we are asked to identify the inferences. Okay, so that's fairly important. And then there are a couple of question types which are not asked as frequently. In fact, even boldface is not asked that frequently nowadays. So you have resolved the paradox question, you have a parallel or similar structure argument questions, right? So that's the broad gamut that we have to the GMAT critical reasoning questions. Of course, they are paragraph based, and one variation that they have is para completion. So we go ahead and talk about that as well. So that's essentially the overview of the different question types. If you want me to dive deeper into any of these, go ahead and drop it in the chat and I would help you with that. So what else? What else? Any other question, any other issue, any other concern that you want to talk about? Anything that is there in your mind? So right now I am looking at your chat. Let's see. Okay, so in critical reasoning, we fundamentally learn to deal with arguments. So what's an argument? An argument essentially is a set of statements, right? So in that set of statements, you have a conclusion. So one of those statements is going to be a conclusion, right? Now this conclusion is supported by some reasons. Now those reasons technically are called premises. So we'd say that the conclusion is supported by some premises, but then there is an extra catch here. All the reasons that are used to support a conclusion may not be stated by the author. So there are some premises that go unstated. Such unstated premises are called assumptions. So we fundamentally require to have an understanding of this basic, this broad structure when it comes to arguments. So you need to develop that ability to read a paragraph, figure out the conclusion, the premises, and then you get into this thought process that allows you to figure out the assumptions. Of course, there are some techniques that help you eliminate the options and all that. So we can talk about those someday if you want me to focus on that. So we'd of course keep bringing more of such sessions. So that is there. So anything else? Any other question? Any other take that you may have? Anything that you want to ask right now? Okay, so if that is all that we have, then let's take a pause, and whenever I am able to find some more time, I'll come over, we can go ahead and practice a few questions together. We can of course go in for another Ask Me Anything session. And as usual, I'm of course going to meet you in our batches on PhysicsWallah's app as well as the website. So that's it from me today. But before I leave, here is something that I want to leave you with. Life does not get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient. So it is true for life. It is true for the GMAT as well. So when you start preparing, there are going to be some areas that may challenge you more. In fact, we talked about critical reasoning today because that happens to be one of those areas that bothers a lot of people. So the thing is, the exam is not going to get any easier. The questions are not going to be forgiving. In fact, as you keep getting them right, the difficulty level anyway increases. So what can you and I do in this kind of a scenario, in this kind of a situation? we can become stronger, we can become resilient. So if we work together, I'm sure that is within our reach. So that's it from me today. I'll see you in the next one and thereafter in the batch. Catch you later. Enjoy your evening. Have a great time.